Hello friends, and welcome to my 5th tutorial on route creation in Dovetail Games Train Simulator 2021. This is Old Dad talking at you, and this outing we will get into the details of laying track on our Chattanooga tutorial route. This is the one that we've been creating in the simulator in our previous tutorials. Here we are on board the head end of a southbound freight train, climbing the grade out of Cowan, Tennessee. This is on my own route that I've been creating in the simulator over the year 2020. With the worldwide pandemic going on, there was ample time available to plant myself in front of the computer and create. I hope y'all have all done well and are healthy as we near what we hope is the end of this plague. That's the Tracy City branch beside us as we're heading up the grade. We are heading for Cumberland Mountain Tunnel on my Cowan Pusher District and Tracy City branch route. I've been working on this for over a year. Here comes a train down the Tracy City branch, headed to Cowan. The fact that I've been working on it for a year should serve as a warning to you that creating a route requires a lot of patience and a willingness to invest the time to make it look lifelike within the limits of the simulator's capabilities. Every track, tree, bush, signal, and telephone pole, rock and stream were added as I learned the program and developed techniques that work for me. Here we are about to enter the Cumberland Mountain Tunnel as the branch line train crosses over the tunnel opening on a stone arch bridge. Notice at the bottom of the screen as we're reaching the top of the grade, entering the tunnel, we start a steep descent towards Rockledge siding. The area I chose to simulate is one I am familiar with, having grown up nearby in southeast Tennessee, United States of America. My route is very heavy on scenery objects and requires a fast computer to properly operate, as will your route that you might create. I have to remind you, as I have in my other tutorials, that the techniques I am using have been learned through a couple of ways. First, I watched a lot of tutorials on YouTube posted by some great teachers. And secondly, and perhaps most importantly, I learned by trial and error technique. I won't tell you that the methods that I'm teaching here are perfect or the best way to accomplish the task, but they work and give a result I think you can be pleased with when you begin to create your own route. I love the mountains of southeast Tennessee, and as I age, this simulator provides me a chance to enjoy reminiscing about the many times that I went train watching in the area, taking photographs and watching the trains struggle to climb over the mountain. I saw the trains of the Louisville and Nashville and later the CSX in the area struggling to climb over these steep grades. This is a pusher district that uses locomotives to help assist the train over the grade through the tunnel. We've exited the tunnel at North Rockledge siding now. We had an approach signal, so we're going to be stopping at the end of the siding at South Rockledge. We will be meeting a northbound train there. I like to see the routes with lots of trees and bushes that come right up to the edge of the railroad, just like it is in the real world. And as I said before, that's a lot of scenery objects that places quite a demand on the computer to generate it. Even though I have a fast computer, I do have some of the settings turned down in order to accommodate all the things that the program has to create and render as we're rolling along. I'm quite impressed with the look of folks who have a faster computer than even I have at how good the routes actually look, especially on the 4K monitors. We have to have the train under control as we're approaching the end of the siding here. And as expected, we have a stop signal. The railroad was originally surveyed and constructed in the 1850s. And almost from the beginning they had to have pusher engines helping trains over the mountain here. In previous tutorials we have discussed finding photos and railroad profile charts and maps to help you with your simulator creation. Another important tool is Google Earth Pro and the topographical maps that are available from the U.S. Geological Survey map store. You may wish to combine all of these things with actually visiting the locations you wish to simulate in the program. Site visits and your own notes, photos, or movies that you take will prove invaluable to help create the look that you want for your route. Always remember to stay off railroad rights-of-way and private property as you explore. As we leave South Rockledge, the remnants of an old runaway track fade into the weeds, and we have to ride the brakes all the way down to Sherwood at the bottom of the steep descending grade of 2%, and sometimes more. This route has lots of deep cuts where the railroad constructors actually excavated rock walls that the railroad passes through in numerous locations. The most important thing when creating a simulation is to have fun and not get discouraged as to that it takes so long to create a proper route. Even though this simulator is aging a bit, having been originally created around 2008, it still gives a reasonable result. My tutorials are longer than most of the ones that are out there on YouTube, and that's just the way it is, folks. After all, I'm just a slow-talking old country boy from the South. One of the most important things you can do when you're running a train is have patience. Sometimes you get over the speed limit just a little bit. It's in this case. But you can overbrake and put yourself into more trouble going down a steep grade. So sometimes you have to have a little patience and wait on the brakes to get the speed under control. I have a lot of respect for the engineers who have for over 150 years have been piloting trains up and down the mountain. I'm sure a few trains wound up in the runaway track, and a few actually derailed. It's a serious piece of railroad. I've really gotten a lot of enjoyment out of creating a simulation of this route. At some point, when I've reached a point where I'm satisfied with it, I plan to post it where folks can also enjoy it and download it sometime in the future. A lot of work goes into detailing a scene like that in front of you, where you have a stream with rocks, lots of trees, a pole line, rock embankments. It does take some time to create all of that. Well, let's leave this brief journey through my work in progress to learn something about track laying. After all, that's what we're here for, right? I wanted to show you this so you can see you can create something that you will really enjoy given time. So we'll close out of this and open up our tutorial route that we have been creating. Okay, let's open up the simulator and review just a bit first. We'll click on Build, click on Chattanooga, our tutorial route we are creating, edit, and wait on it to load. And here we are in our route that we've been creating. In our previous tutorial, we learned how to use the scenery tools to create our roadbed. I advise you to go back and review that tutorial if you have not already seen it. But we've created this roadbed around the front of Lookout Mountain in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's a nice section of roadbed to start laying track. As we created it, it made some cuts. That's a marker that we use to indicate where we were going to adjust the scenery. Adjust the gradient. And another cut. And then we arrive where Lookout Creek is located, and the railroad operates on a fill. And then we finished up around this corner for a start. So we are now ready to begin laying some track. Our tutorial route that we've been creating is in Chattanooga, Tennessee, at the foot of Lookout Mountain, and what is commonly known as Craven's Yard, which was originally constructed by the Nashville and Chattanooga Railway, then later became the Louisville and Nashville, and currently is the CSX Railroad. Now, we also learned how to set the grades by using Google Earth in our previous tutorial, and that's what these markers are for, to show where we have a gradient change. I suggest you go back and review that. This is how I do it when you don't have a profile chart such as this that gives you the elevations above sea level and the actual grade, whether it's ascending or descending, and also the curvature. Most of that information we're getting from Google Earth. We use the elevation indicated here in the information bar in the lower right corner, and by holding the cursor over a particular piece of track, we can find out what the elevation above sea level is for that given piece of track in Google Earth. We then convert that to something that will work in the program, and then we create our roadbed using these painting tools here in the upper left corner of our toolbox, using the height, decrease height, increase height, level, and smooth tools. When we use the leveling tool, we are also setting elevations in this lower box down here, which adjusts the size of the paintbrush and the elevation that we might want to set the grade at. So what I want to talk about today is that we're going to be using the snap tool, which in our track linear objects tools, open up in the track rule down here, we have some gradient where we can set an actual number gradient like a 1% grade or a 0.1% grade or a 0.5% grade. Then also we're going to be using the snap to terrain radio button. And I want to give you a little demonstration of what can happen when you use this and you don't level the grade to begin with. So as we look over here, I'm going to set a piece of track out and show you what happens when you use snap to terrain. So we're going to pick the track that we normally use, which is the PC main track yard. That's what I've been using in the route so far. And we're going to lay some track. We're going to start out here and we're just going to lay a straight out across the countryside with the snap to terrain button operating. Now you'll notice that what happened is, look at this ridiculous grade that it just created. That's because when it reached a particular portion of a hump, it followed that hump rather than across the undulating terrain uphill and downhill. Because the snap to terrain button looks at the first piece of terrain that it reaches and actually touches and then follows that gradient from there. Now using the snap to terrain would not work to create a realistic railroad unless you previously set the elevation for the track that you're going to create. I'll show you how that works as we begin to lay some track. So let's get started laying some track. We'll come back over to our beginning marker. We'll turn on the Google overlay by clicking Control G, and Google overlay begins to populate on our terrain, and this is the track that we're going to simulate. First I'm going to set the grade to a descending 0.1% grade because I already know from my previous work on this that this is a descending grade leading down to where it begins ascending or climbing here at this marker. And then we're also going to check the snap to terrain button. This will put the track directly on the terrain we have leveled for the grade as we go along. So when we want to lay track, of course, we need to get our linear objects tool lined up parallel to the area on the Google overlay that we want to create. You see that my initial effort there, I'm a little off. So we're going to go down here and we're going to line it up a little better. And as I told you in the beginning, so much of this is trial and error. You have to learn to do this. There's no tutorial that you can watch that will get it exact for you. You begin to do it and you learn to do it. See, I went a little bit too far that time when I adjusted. So we right click and the linear object tool appears. Now let's talk about the linear object tool. We adjust the linear object tool by left clicking and rotating it around. There's another little review for you. But if you've been going along with me, you already know that from my previous tutorials. I'm going to move it over a little more in the center of the track, trying to center it between the rails. And we'll lay it out and see what it looks like. Looks like I need to turn it just a little bit to the right again. It's a very small, because you know from geometry that a small deviation at the beginning becomes a big deviation over the length of the line. So we'll pull it down here to about where I think the curve starts, which I'm going to guess is about right there, and we'll stop. Now because I know I'm going to begin ascending there, I'm now going to make it 0 gradient here and let the snap to terrain tool do the work for us here from this point forward. Because I've already set the gradient, the level of the roadbed I set previously according to the numbers that I had gotten off Google Earth. So let's lay some track and see how that turns out. Looks like I'm a little under. So when that happens, the first thing I want to check is my Google Earth overlay, make sure it's down as far as it should go. Now let's try it again. Looks like I'm still a little under. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to change this to an increasing grade of 0.1%, because I need to get a little bit of a grade going there around this corner. Now I can see it coming around all the way. I'm not going under the scenery. Now, one of the things that I want to say here is I am using what I would call the quick method of laying track. I'm not concerned about super elevation. I just want to run a railroad, and dragging the track around here like this and creating a radius, I cannot have super elevation in it. I have to use the easement tool in order to have that super elevation. And I will get into another tutorial of showing you how to use the easement tool to lay track. It's a little more complicated, but it gives you smooth curves that allow you to use super elevation. So I'm trying to get us around to the point where we would be laying tangent along where Google Earth says that the railroad is actually running. I'm going to increase the overlay just a little bit where we can see the track a little better there. There we go. Each time we lay track, we have to make certain that it snaps in there very well to the point that it should snap into at the end of the track. Otherwise, you will have a mismatch that is quite a problem to come back and correct. Let me just kind of show you what I'm talking about. If I just started laying track there, I lay a section of track, you come back down here, you get this ugly bumpers, and you see I didn't really line it up. It didn't snap into place where it should have. So that would be a problem that once you've laid a significant amount of railroad, that would be a real problem to come back and correct. So we don't want to do that. Hit the undo key and let's make it snap in there. You'll see it snap in just like a magnet. Wonk. And that's the way we want it. Often we're guessing where the tangent actually begins. This method is imprecise because I'm not using the easements tool, but it's the fastest way to actually get some track down where you can begin enjoying a railroad. Pardon my wiggling around. Looks like we're pretty good down to the end of this straightaway. And then we're going to estimate again where our radius begins. And then take it around the curve under the Norfolk Southern Railroad. Looks like I'm doing a fairly decent radius around there. Looks like I needed to come just a little bit more with the tangent. So let's go down here and we'll add another little short piece of tangent. And then we'll pull it around again and see what that looks like. Oh, that looks a lot better, doesn't it? Lined up. I'm going to guess about right there might be a good place to try the tangent. And look, I was wrong. I needed to come a little farther. Right click, then hit the undo, and we've got to come all the way back around here. We still got the right starting point after we added our short piece of tangent. And this time I'll try and pull it around a little farther. Going to get a little bit of a spiral here. Just a short, easy radius. And see what that looks like. Still off there, so right click, which disengages your cursor. Let me come back around and we'll adjust it a little more. Now notice that when it's yellow, that's a tangent, and then when you pull your mouse left or right, you bend it into a radius. Too far to the other direction. Right click, undo, and we'll try it again. Now, I've gotten it close, so what I'm going to do now is my split method. I'm going to actually take a little piece of the track off using the split tool. You see the split tool appears here in the track, and I'm going to shorten it up just a little bit. We'll delete that little section and then we'll start again. Set our speeds 30, 30, using the yard. Need to go just a little bit more with a split. Sometimes it's easy to go farther than you need to and then actually make the changes with the split tool so that you get it more precise. All I'm doing is using the split tool, and I'm cutting a little section of track, and I am deleting it with the delete key. That sure looks like it's lining up better, doesn't it? Okay, we need to come down to where the next radius would begin, our next curve. And we're going to come down to about right there, and that looks like where the radius would end. And then we'll see what it looks like going this way. Looks like I needed just a fuzz more. Let's hit the right click one time, then undo, take that section of track out, and snap it back in place. And let's try it again. See, we're close, but not quite. Right click. Right clicking disengages the linear objects tool. Undo takes us back to a starting point. 1 undo. Okay, now I can use the split tool method and shave off just a fuzz. And I hope that will put us where we want to be. I'm not going to set the speeds this time, I'm just going to check it, see what it looks like. That looks pretty good. Now we're up to the next radius. Undo that and I'm going to go back and set my speeds. Sometimes what you think is a shortcut winds up not being a shortcut because I got it right that time. All repetition and trial and error. Try dragging a radius around here. See what that looks like. Well, see, I stopped too short on that. See, I'm way off the line here. So we'll add another little piece of tangent. And notice that we're coming to a turnout, so we're going to pull up here and stop, because we're going to have to work that turnout in the other direction from this track once we lay it. So we're going to stop right there now, and we're going to come down. We're going to look and see what our railroad looks like. I'm going to turn off the Google overlay for the moment, Control G, and let's just review our line and see what the gradients look like as we go back through here. I see a little bump or two in it, but it looks reasonable. Looks like the Snap to Terrain tool has done a fairly decent job of keeping us where we need to be. Here's where there was a slight turn down, and then it came back up. In this curve down here, there was a downgrade starting right here. This is basically a water level gradient around here in front of the mountain because that's right next to the Tennessee River. So I'm reasonably happy with that. We'll make some adjustments, make the grades look correct, and I'll show you how to do that now by using this gradient tool. So let's take a look at what we've got here. When you highlight the piece of track, notice in the information bar down here, it begins to give you information about the track that you're on. So that's going, remember we were on a 0.1% downgrade. Here we're showing about a 0.4% upgrade, which is actually a little steep for what should be there. 0.4 there. Now we've gone to 0. That's because we had that gradient change back there where it went to about 665 feet above sea level. Still running about 0. Now here's where we'll probably see a significant grade. See, that's a 0.7 downgrade, and you can see that. just for the fun of it, even though we're creating this as if we didn't have a profile chart, let's look at the profile chart for this section. Here's where we start around that curve, and there's actually a little slight descending 0.75 grade in that curve. Then it gradually comes down to 0.37 and then starts ascending again, where we go to 665 again, and then we crossed under US Highway 41 and then go across Lookout Creek. So that's interesting that it created that with our simple method that we used. However, that's pretty severe, the little change in gradient right there. Now what we can do is we can hit this, come up to our toolbox, and here you have the gradient. And when you hit gradient, you'll see these arrows appear. And those arrows allow you to adjust the height of the track. See, if you highlight that particular arrow, it will tell you what the height is. That's 202.71 meters. And if I left click on it while it's highlighted, I can raise and lower that. So that I know the grade behind me is a little sharp, I'm going to raise it up just a little bit. And we're going to go back and look at it. I'll raise that up. Let's see what it changed the gradient to, because it was 0.7 before. It's still 0.7, so we're going to take a little more of an up. We'll click the gradient tool. I'm going to raise it up just a little more. Let's see what it looks like now. I see that sharp elbow that was in the track is gone. That's showing a 0.1 downgrade. That's showing a 0%. Then the next section is showing a 0.1 upgrade. So I'm going to look at it here and see what I think about it. I think I like it. Sorry about going into the layout, but I'm just zipping around here, probably making you motion sick. But I'm eyeballing the track just like a real track man would. A real track man that's going to level the track will put his eye right on top of the rail, and then the men use jacks, and they can jack that rail up and raise it up until, sighting down the top of the rail, he determines that the dip in the track is out and you've got a smooth transition. Of course, now that today they have modern machines that use laser lights or LED lights in order to make those adjustments. That looks pretty good. I like that. Come down here. We didn't have much of a grade change there. Using the snap to terrain tool. Now there's a little something wobbly going on. Let's take a look at that. Using the snap to terrain tool, it's laid it right down on top of the grade that we have created. So we got a 0.1, and then right on top of that it's a 0.6, and that's a downgrade. We don't really want that much of a downgrade. And then the next section is 0.1 again. So let's hit the gradient button again, and we're going to raise this up just a bit to level that track out. See how you adjust it by holding left click, hold. We can take it up or down wherever we think we need to take it to make it more correct. Now we're at 0.3 and here we're at 0.2. Let's take a look and see what it looks like by eye. Still got a bit of a hump in it there, so I may have put that in it, but we'll take it out. What I may need to do is lower this just a fraction. That looks much better. Okay, Now what we're going to do is we're going to lay the second main line adjacent to that track. And to do that, we're first going to use the select tool. And we're going to start right here. And we're going to select all this route that we have created. Just by running along the track, the select tool turns red. Sorry to make you motion sick. I'll try and slow down. I'm just used to going. We'll bring it all the way up here to the end. Let me click. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're next going to use the offset tool. There's the offset tool. I'm going to click offset, and then I'm going to select PC track yard, and then wherever you've got one of these boxes, I could lay a track on this side, I could lay a track on this side, and it's working on a 5-foot center. I'm going to change that to a 4.5-foot center and see what that looks like. I'm sorry, I said feet, it's actually meters. Program is designed and uses the measurements of Great Britain because that's where most of the work is done with dovetail games, and I think it originates out of England. We hit PC track yard again. Now just for the fun of it, let's turn Google Overlay on again and see how that's lining us up. Looks pretty darn good. Alright, PC track yard again. Click. Turn Google Overlay off just so we don't have all that clutter under us. PC main track yard. Each location that you have one of these boxes where you made a joint in the track, you'll have to come and lay your second track in that manner. Notice that we're getting into the side of the bluff here. We'll have to come back with the tools and clean that up a little bit with the painting tools. Even this little short section will have to get the treatment. Now the good thing about it is once I've leveled the track up, like I did before, siding and setting the gradients and adjusting them, the track that I'm laying adjacent to it like this using the offset tool will follow that same gradient. And just like that, we've created a double track main line. Let's turn on Google Overlay again and see where we are. I'm going to set the speed again. Get all our parameters set, and then we're going to see what laying a little more track here looks like. And going straight, we're obviously off, so we're going to have to put a little more radius in it here. But not much. See what that looks like. Looks like I'm off, eh? So we can try shortening that up, but I think what I'll do is I'll use the split tool method and shorten it up just a fuzz that way. Almost there. One more split. I'm going to take the chance, set my parameters, and then try it, and maybe we'll make it this time without having to make another cut. I like it. So let's bring this down to the point that we would start our next radius. About right there. And then see what that looks like. Whoops, double clicked. I should have not clicked at all. Looks like I'm falling in. Looks like I need just a little bit more tangent. Should have taken it a little farther, shouldn't I? Right click, undo, snap it back in there. Now I think I'll use the snap tool or split tool method, and we'll just split a little bit of it off there, and I think we'll have it. And that's about as far as we'd created a grade. I'd say about right there. We'll stop. Okay, let's review our work. And we'll turn off Google Overlay, and we'll just come down and sight down along our railroad and see what it looks like. If you recall, we had sort of a pinnacle right here where it started to go back downhill. It's about 670 feet. That's actually looking pretty good around through there. I like it. So now we have that track swinging over the breeze there. You'll eventually come back and put a bridge in place. We need to look at how we're going to add us a turnout. Let's turn on Google Overlay. Get an idea of what the track looks like. Now, doing these turnouts can be the most aggravating thing that you will do, getting them to connect. In this case, we're going to turn off the snap to terrain. We're going to set this to 0 grade. And we're going to look here, we're going to actually tick this box which is snap to track. I'm going to pin this out for just a second because we need to find out where the switch point actually begins to take effect under our track. So there's the switch machine right there. That's the point at which we will begin to lay our track. So we see here where the point of switch is, right where this electric switch machine is. And I did that by raising the Google overlay up to where we could actually see what's going on there, because the way the fill that I created is dropping off there, it's actually not rendering it where we can really see it. So I just raised it up where we can see it. So what let's do, let's go to our objects and go to the A marker 01, and let's set us a marker right here. And that'll tell us in the track exactly where we want the point of switch to be. Now let's lower Google overlay back down. Let's come down to the point where we want to start creating our track. Now to create a turnout, or a set of points as they call it overseas, to create a turnout, what we do is we get our linear objects tool and we select our track speed. And we set it up and it snaps in, as you see. Now notice that the arrow is pointing the wrong direction. That's because that's the direction that we were creating the track. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it right here where we want the points to begin. The points are the sharp rails on a switch that actually divert the wheels in the direction that you want them to travel, down the straight side of the turnout or the curved side of the turnout. The points are adjusted by the switch machine. So I'm going to click right there, and then I'm just going to drag out in this direction until I think I've got it kind of lined up there, and I'm going to get this upper right corner kind of over the closest rail right there, and then I'm going to actually snap it in place there about like that, and let's just see what that looks like when we do it. And you'll notice that we created now a turnout with the points. You notice that the points are a little bit farther from where I actually set my marker, so I'm going to come back and reset that in just a minute. But look, it created the frog and the guardrails for the turnout. Now, because I have the snap to track connected over here, I'm going to pull it on out this way and just see what happens. You've got a little turn back curve, a slight turn back curve, and a turnout, and then it comes down and should line up and snap. You see that turned red up there? That's going to connect us and put us in to this track, and it's going to make the connection, and we'll do a little weld job there, and we'll have a smooth transition around that turnout. But I actually want to come back. I right clicked one time. I'm going to click the undo key, and we'll click it one more time and take our little turnout out, and I'm actually going to reset the linear objects tool a little farther this way, so we actually get those points to start where they really start in Google Earth, the way we want them. So let's look at it from above. And I'm going to pull it to about right there and see what that looks like. Trial and error, folks. Okay, I kind of like that. So let's pull this down, get our little turnout curve just slightly set there. And now let's bring this on down and see if there we go. We snapped. You see, we snapped right to that track. So a couple of things that have to happen to make that happen. You've got to have your alignment in such a manner that you're close to the same radius that you're connecting into, or tangent, and you've got to have the elevation about the same in order for it to really snap in. If I set, let's just, for instance, let's back off that and let's go over and let's set it to a plus 1% grade, and I come in like that, it did it. It made a liar out of me. Let's try it to a 3% grade, just to exaggerate it. It's going to make a liar out of me. It's not going to do it. I was trying to demonstrate to you that you can have some factors that will keep it from happening the way it should, snapping to. It's one of the most frustrating things you'll ever deal with when you're building a yard in this program, and you're trying to get the turnouts to connect to the tracks that you've laid, it can be very frustrating. Sometimes you have to start from this direction, snap your linear objects tool into place, and then come back this way and make it snap too. Okay, there's an example of where it is not going to snap in. It waits to get way up here to snap into place. Let's just do that just for the fun of it and see what it looks like. Now look, it created this crazy set of points here. And it really fouled up our frog. It took away our guardrails. These are some of the crazy things that can happen in this program. The actual radius of the turnout looks very nice. You don't have quite as sharp a little turn as I put in it in my little track there. But this self auto-created route looks fairly nice. But let's do this. Let's click the undo, and we're back to where we were basically. I'm going to take out my little curve section that I put in there, and I'm going to see if it will actually connect without me doing anything other than using the snap to track, and see what happens. Sometimes it will and sometimes it won't. See, it will not connect in there. I'm not lined up in the right manner to get into that. But if I put my little short little tangent, short little radius in there, it will make its way around and connect. But I'm going to be honest with you, I don't like that. That's too sharp. It's not prototypical. So let's undo that and undo my little radius. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to show you another trick. I'm going to come here, I'm going to take my split tool, and I'm going to come just before these long ties here under the frog, and I'm going to actually split that. I'm going to ditch that little short section of track. I'm now going to reset everything. I'm going to reset my linear objects tool. I'm going to come around and see if it'll connect. It will not, but I'm going to have a much better radius coming through there that looks more prototypical. Bing. But it won't connect, you see. Do a little bit more. Now it connected. Now I can visually tell you that that looks more appealing to the eye. It looks like it will be a gentle flow for a train making a movement through there, not have a sharp turn to deal with. But look what we did when we made that connection. 9 times out of 10 it makes an extra set of points that you don't need. You see, here's a little section of track. It comes down here and it added a little switch machine, and we don't want any of that. So what you do is you come over it and you highlight it and you get it to light up yellow. See, I'm highlighting the main track, and then this is the little stub section of track that I want to get rid of. So I hit that, I highlight it in red by left clicking on it. I click that and look what it did. It created this little monster in the middle of the track here of 2 bumpers. Now we're going to use our weld tool, which is this tool right here. This is the weld tool. Click on that. We create the little box up above. I click that, and now we have a contiguous piece of track. So we weld it together. And it looks like it matches up fairly decently. Not too sharp. And now we've just created a turnout. The next thing is, it is a powered switch. We have our little switch machine. I'm going to highlight that and make that come up. And I'm going to bring it around to where the points are. Here's the end of the point. That switch machine should sit under the end of that point. I'm going to give it I'm going to click this little radio button right here, which takes us back to a different, more user-friendly rotating X and Y tool. grab the little outside circle and rotate it around. Now I'm going to take that electric switch machine, I'm going to drag it so it's sort of where it needs to be. Right beside the switch. Okay, now we're going to lower that down into the ballast so it sort of blends in with the ties where it should be. Give it just a little bit of downhill that way and then bring it up. We'll try that. That looks pretty decent. I'm going to use the painting tool, and I'm going to use the leveling tool. I'm going to look and see what the, I don't remember what this height was here. I may mess that up. Actually, I'm going to use the snap to terrain tool. I'm going to set my tool. I got it 30. I'll set it to 25 right here for my brush. I'm just going to pop that snap tool just for a second and get that up where it should be. The bridge abutment is about right here at the end of the switch machine. So now, when we raise Google Earth up, we'll see that we're fairly close to where we should be with the switch machine. So we've laid a turnout. We don't need our little tool here anymore to tell us where our little pin. I'm going to delete that. And let's take a look at it all. Not bad. Now, if we go back over to this side, you can see there's another turnout leading into the yard. Now, I didn't create the roadbed for that yet, so I'm not going to install that switch. What we are going to do is we're going to go back along our track. I'm going to turn off Google Overlay so that we can see that we've got a whole bunch of these little bumpers all the way back to where we started our track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the weld tool again, and at each one of these locations I'm going to weld those joints together all the way back to the beginning. Did I pass one? Apparently I did. We'll weld that. We'll weld that one. That's odd. I don't know why it's showing that. We'll weld that one. We'll weld that one. I'm not used to it leaving the block hanging in the air after I do my welding. So we're all the way back to the beginning there. We now have a double track main line. Running around the front of Lookout Mountain, just like the CSX line as it exists today. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to use the snap tool in the painting department there, and we're going to go along and we're going to run this along the top of the grade, and that will raise any slight imperfections in the roadbed underneath where there's no terrain up to the bottom of the roadbed. It'll raise it up. It will also clear some of these scenery deviations where we didn't quite have a clear roadbed. You can't have a train running through the side of the hill, can we? So we just roll along. I've got that brush set to about 25. All these tools you've got to be careful with because you can drastically change the adjacent scenery that you may like the way that it is. Could be making the cut larger than you really want it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the size of this down to 20 because I sort of like the way we've got it. Don't want to change it too drastically. But I don't want the scenery sitting above my track, the terrain. So a lot more work to be done with the scenery. That big lump I just did took out a hunk of the mountainside there. I'm going to click the undo button. Now remember I told you that if you don't let off the mouse occasionally you'll drastically change a large section if you don't occasionally unclick the left side of the mouse as you're rolling on here using this tool or any of these scenery tools. And then you'll undo a long section of something that you didn't really intend to undo. Now we've got quite a bit of mountainside here. I think I will increase the brush size here to about 30 and see what we can do with some of this down through here, because the track is very close to the mountainside, and when I create this, I'm actually going to take some rock and create a rock face along the front of that. So I don't mind if it goes back a little deeper than maybe it should, because we put the scenery object in there like the rock. It's like creating the rock cuts we were running the train through earlier on the tutorial. You can see it's creating some more terrain underneath, but it's only snapping up to the bottom of the railroad. I'm not actually changing the elevation dramatically. It's just snapping up to the elevation of the track underneath. So there we are. Now we've been over the whole line. We've created a double track main line around the front of Lookout Mountain. There's an underpass in this curve where the Norfolk Southern line comes out and heads over towards Wauhatchie. Here's Lookout Creek. And let's see, we didn't change the Norfolk Southern again comes over in this vicinity. I don't like the way I did that. I'm going to change the size of my brush again. See, I took down too much of that hillside where there's actually an underpass. I'm going to change that back to 20, and then we'll go through here and snap to the track. This is one of the most useful tools that you will use in the program as you go along and you learn more about it. Alright, we've laid a decent section of track. We've learned how to put a turnout in. I think our gradients look good. We can run a train on this before you know it. But I'm going to get a little more track in here. As we learn, we will create some more. There's a crossover that goes here, some yard tracks, and then it leads downtown, closer to downtown Chattanooga, where it actually crosses the Norfolk Southern Railroad again at grade. So we've got a long way to go here, but we've started laying some track. And I'm going to wind this one up and say thank you for watching. Be patient. Give me a like. Hope you're enjoying this. I'm certainly enjoying telling you about it and trying to help. That's what it's all about. I'm just trying to help. As I've said, my methods may not be exacting or perfect, but you can get a railroad going that you can run a train on, and that's the whole point of it. And you can be more precise, and we'll get into that as we go along in some other tutorials. By being precise, I'm talking about using the easement tool to lay track, and then you can super elevate curves. So I'm sort of giving you the discount way of doing this. This will run a train just fine. May have a bump or two in it, but you'll enjoy doing it, and you'll get to run a train. You can create a route somewhere that you would like to create a route. Could be somewhere in the United States, somewhere else in the world. And I've always been amazed at how everything revolves around certain segments of the world that's the most popular. In this country, it would have to be something to do with the Santa Fe Railroad, or the Union Pacific, or the New York Central. Nothing wrong with that, but you know, we feel slighted here in the South. There's rarely a route. The exception to that, of course, being the Clinchfield route. But most of these wonderful routes in the South aren't out there in a simulator, and probably one of the reasons is because there's so much to do with the scenery and the terrain to get your grades right. It's a lot of work. I don't have a team of guys in a skyscraper, graphic artists working on creating the route for us. So, as we roll along, I hope you'll continue to watch my tutorials, and we'll get us a railroad built here in the front of Lookout Mountain. Have some fun doing it. Good day.